At this point, it's pretty much obvious to everybody and their grandmother that the comic book industry is in a lot of trouble and it's sinking to the bottom of the ocean like a rock tied to a bigger rock. And while I'm sure that the inevitable collapse is going to be blamed on everything from the global lockdown to the toxic fans, no one is actually going to call out the people who set things in motion. And things were set in motion some time ago by a group of people who didn't care about the industry, and still don't, who wanted to project their ideas and their ideologies onto already existing characters and stories. And like a pressure cooker that's been left on too long, this thing is about to go. And today, I'm going to take the time to introduce to you a few of these people, because you know what they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And before we start this thing, there are three things I'd like to point out. Number one, these people did not do the damage by themselves. Alone, each one of them would be an annoyance at best, but put together, along with everyone else involved, they were enough of a critical mass to actually damage the industry to the point of practically no return. Second of all, everything that I'm going to show you in this video is publicly accessible. And third, don't contact these people. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get started. And without further ado, our first guest is the lovely Sue DeConnick. She has been a writer for Marvel Comics and others for quite some time now, and she is one of the people responsible for turning one of my personal favorite characters, which is Carol Danvers, or Ms. Marvel as she used to be known, from this, a strong, independent, powerful woman, ironically enough, into this. And a quick look at her Wikipedia page showcases what she's about. You can see the segment on her career and the segment focusing on feminism. And that segment is so big for a reason. She injects a lot of her personal politics into the books she writes. And thanks to the magical time machine called the Internet, I have an interview of her from the not-so-distant 2017, which we're going to take a look at right now.
Sue DeConnick introduced us to a totally different version of Carol Danvers in Captain Marvel and made the Carol Corps happen. She's also the genius writer behind Bitch Planet.
You can look at the whole thing online. It's publicly accessible, as I said, but word of warning, you're going to want to take something for the inevitable headache you're going to get.
You know, the strong, the big strong heroes go in and help the little guys, the people who are oppressed. Essentially what feminism is about.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
This is always when people are like, would you please get your politics out of my comic books? I'm like, what comic books are you reading?
Oh, and that's just the beginning.
I'm sorry to break this to you, but Captain America is a social justice warrior.
What? What the fuck?
Okay, I'm gonna try to make my response to this as readable and as clear as humanly possible. Are you ready? Here we go. No! Clear enough? Good. Moving on.
I know you mean that as an insult, but there's just no, that is the definition of what he is, And if all you want to read are, I don't know, books about, I literally can't even think of what would be.
You're right. If Cap had a Twitter account, he'd be an SJW for sure.
I'm sorry. Let me catch my breath. Oh no. Oh my god. I'd ask this guy how many books about Captain America he's read, but I'm guessing the answer would be 0. Let's continue, shall we?
And if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book.
Right. First of all, done. Second of all, there's a teensy-weensy little problem with your statement. Actually, three of them, which, considering it's my video, I'm going to take the liberty to point out. Number one is already on the screen. What's that? Too small? You can't see it? Let me zoom that in for you and I'll read it out loud. It's not your book. Yes, you're responsible for the book. Yes, you're the writer on the book. But there's also an artist and an editor and a bunch of other people involved. And Marvel owns the character and the book itself. You see, J.K. Rowling can say, if you don't like my stories, if you don't like my characters, don't read my book. Because she actually created those characters, she created that world, and she owns the book. Ethan Van Sciver can also say, if you don't like me, and if you don't like Cyberfrog, don't read my book, because he created the character, he created the world, and he owns the book. Anyway, you didn't create these characters, you didn't create these worlds, you're working for someone who owns them and owns the book you're making. You're someone who's getting paid to write a story for the owner of the book, which in your case would be Marvel Comics. Number two, the people who you're telling to not buy your story are the people who are the actual fans of these characters and these worlds. People who are invested in them and who care about them a lot more than you probably do, and that have been around a lot longer than you have. And clearly you have no issues with taking characters that you did not create and injecting your personal politics into their world and into them without caring about what these characters' legacy is and what the original intent behind them was. And number three, the people who you're supposedly making this book for, who care about your politics, don't buy these books and they don't read comics.
When some of the more reactionary comic book fans, what my academic friends like to call the normative comic book reader, which is, by the way, like such a myth, because
She goes on a typical tirade, but she finishes up with this.
we can have a little conference on that. But I think my point being that some of the men with short memories who are so threatened by myself and my female colleagues and some of the books that we make that bring different perspectives, who feel that we are taking something away from them. Like, I have no interest in taking your books. You continue to make, we continue to make all of the books. You can have the books that you want, but I'd like there to be some others too. And I don't think that that's, like, I'm gonna make the books that I want to make, and if you don't want to read them, don't read them.
Okay, no argument there. Of course you're free to tell the stories you want to tell and create the characters you want to create and make the worlds you want to make. So why aren't you doing it? Why are you doing it with an already established franchise and characters that have decades of stories behind them? Characters who have been established and created by other people. Why are you injecting your personal politics and your agenda onto them? Why don't you create something new? Something for the people you claim it's for? Why don't you turn to them for support, like Ethan Van Sciver did with Cyberfrog? At this point, he's already proven that it works, so there are no excuses on that front. Why do you have to do what you do in established universes with established characters? But I'm guessing that that's the line of questioning that labels me as whatever buzzword is inserted in this situation, right? And no matter how many times Captain Marvel gets relaunched or any other of these books gets restarted, it doesn't change the fact that that book was cancelled due to poor sales. And it doesn't change the fact that people are not interested in you injecting your personal politics and your personal beliefs into characters they care about and characters you, again, did not create. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I pick up these comic books, I pick it up to visit my favorite characters and follow their amazing adventures in these wonderful worlds. Not to be talked down to by an author that injects her personal politics, browbeats everybody over the head with her talking points, and to read up on feminism. And by the way, the like to dislike ratio on this video seems to showcase how people feel about what she had to say. And before we move on to our next guest, let's take a look at the time capsule that is the comment section of this video. Yes, problem solved. I won't buy your books. Well done. Well, she did extend the invitation. It's no surprise that people are taking her up on it. I don't think anyone's threatened by you or your books, honestly. There's just some people who don't agree with whatever it is you're trying to say, which is completely fine since everyone's entitled to an opinion. You can't just make them out to be bad people for not agreeing with you. That is true, but she's doing it anyway, and she's destroying the comic books because what she has to say comes at the expense of the characters and the story. People like this are the ones driving Marvel into the dirt. Well, if you change Marvel with comic book industry, yep, that's pretty much what's happening. As you can see by the comment section, people knew where things were going years ago. Now, let's move to our next guest, Cena Grace. And he has his personal pronouns in his Twitter bio. Why am I not surprised? Anyway, he complained not so long ago about Marvel's struggle with representation, which is kind of ironic considering he is a gay comic book writer who was given a gay comic book character. And he is also the person behind the mutant drag queen Shade, a new character added to the X-Men. Now, am I saying that Shade can be a deep, developed, interesting character with an interesting story and background? No, I'm not. But unfortunately, the people who create these characters end up projecting themselves and their ideology onto them, so these characters become a vehicle exclusively and only for that, and thus become shallow and unappealing. And by the way, the art in the Iceman book, just horrendous. I won't subject you to any more of it, but to give you an idea what it's about, his parents don't seem to have that much of a problem with him being a mutant, but he's dead to them because he's homosexual. I don't need to explain how ridiculous that is in an X-Men book, and if you listen closely, you will hear the sound of the foreheads of X-Men fans hitting the nearest flat surface. And for most recent times, we have Valiant Comics senior editor Heather Antos claims America has the worst fans. Not exactly the proper attitude to have right now, just saying. And last but not least, we have newcomer Dana Schwartz, who's accomplished virtually nothing but has written a memoir, who is against the objectification of women but promoted her book like this, and who was given the She-Hulk comic book and the TV show. And when she was asked about her credentials and why she wants to write these books when she's never demonstrated passion about comics in the past, she went on a tirade on Twitter about toxic fan gatekeeping. And she has a history on bashing on white men. And there you have just a few of the people who are damaging the comic book industry. Now mind you, each one of them individually is just a drop in the bucket. But enough of them gathered together reach a critical mass that is destroying comic books from within. And these people project themselves onto comic books and use them as a platform for their personal politics and agendas, at the expense of the characters, the stories, and most importantly, the fans. The same fans who have supported this industry for decades are being called every buzzword in the book because they don't agree with what these authors and artists have to say. But the thing is, you're not a bad person if you don't agree with them. You're not a bad person if you don't like the current version of She-Hulk or Captain Marvel, or if you think that Iceman shouldn't be gay, because he's an established character of over half a century. And the thing is, these people may have access to these characters, and they may have been given free rein to do with them whatever they want, but they don't own you, and they don't own your money. And they're not entitled to it. And the game these people play isn't a fair one. It's set up in their favor. The goalposts are constantly being moved. They are never happy. Nothing is ever enough. And the only rules are rules for thee, but not for me. These are a bunch of smug, cynical, arrogant narcissists who will never be satisfied and who will never be happy. And it's all done at our expense. Don't buy the book, but if you don't buy the book, you'll be labeled a buzzword. But if you do buy the book and have some kind of criticism, you can't do that because you'll be a buzzword. And I, for one, refuse to partake in this mess. Let the people who these books are supposedly for pick up the slack. Honestly, Captain America's... I can't even say it. I'll see you around.